I want my MTV.
I want my MTV.
Call your cable company and say, I want my MTV!
80s MTV was dominated by music videos, and 90s MTV was dominated by some of the most experimental, but also incredibly enjoyable programming. Shows like Beavis and Butthead and Liquid Television were so unique and could not have existed anywhere but MTV in the 90s. The mixture of popular music and bizarre shows helped to keep MTV relevant, which changed when MTV decided to go with non-stop marathons of ridiculousness, but that's a whole other story. There was a ton of content they put out back then, and sadly, some of them just didn't get the views they needed to survive. Here's 5 shows from the very experimental age of MTV that you may have missed or forgotten about. The Head. The Head was originally an 11-minute short that MTV ran during their animation weekend in August of 1994. It was about a guy who wakes up one morning to discover that his head is big. Ridiculously big. He finds out that an alien named Roy moved into his head and needs his help to stop an invasion from another group of parasitic aliens. The show was created by Eric Fogel, who at the time had just graduated from NYU. He created an animated short called Mutilator, which caught the attention of the executives at MTV Animation. Their animated stuff was taking off, and they were looking for something weird to turn into a series. The pilot for The Head went over well, and MTV decided to make it part of their new upcoming animation block they called MTV's Oddities. The show followed what was set up in the pilot, but expanded the scale. They introduced a bunch of human abnormalities, like a guy with a lawnmower blade stuck in his head, that joined in the fight against the Gorks. The show premiered on December 18, 1994, less than 6 months after the pilot aired. MTV even put out a short promotional video to show how they were able to outsource the animation for a faster turnaround. They also highlighted some of the problems with outsourcing, like animation frames not lining up properly. The first season ran for 13 episodes, including the pilot. The episodes were each 11 minutes long, and they merged 2 of them together for airing. So even though there are technically 13 episodes, there was only 7 shows. It was a modest hit and was renewed for a second season. There was a long gap between the seasons. Season 1 ended in January of 1995. Season 2 aired February 6, 1996. With Season 2, they expanded the episodes, so now each one was 21 minutes, instead of 2 episodes merged together. Well, except for the first show back, which was an 11-minute recap of Season 1. Even with the gap in the seasons, the show was doing okay ratings-wise, but it was still canceled. The last episode aired on February 27, 1996. The show was John DiMaggio's first voice acting job. He's since gone on to be one of the most successful voice actors in the business, with 2 of his best-known roles being Bender from Futurama and Marcus Phoenix from Gears of War, on top of hundreds of other shows. Eric Fogel continued to work for MTV Animation and created the very successful Celebrity Deathmatch series. The Head was released on DVD, but only as part of Amazon's burn-on-demand service and is no longer available. You can purchase both seasons on Amazon's Prime Video, though. The Max. The Max was a comic that was created by Sam Keith and distributed by Image in 1993. While many of Image's comics at the time were superheroes in tights fighting each other, The Max was a big standout. Outside of the obvious being a very striking and unique art style, the core concept was far removed from other books like Youngblood. The Max was about a character who exists in 2 worlds, the real world and the Outback, which more or less resembles the Outback of Australia, but is referred to as an alternate reality. In the real world, the Max is a homeless man who spends time with Julie, a freelance social worker. In the Outback, the Max is a hero who protects the Jungle Queen Julie from the evil Mr. Gone, a serial rapist who has targeted her. The Max fights him in both worlds. The animated series was another entry in MTV's Oddities block. The show premiered on April 8, 1995. Much like The Head, the show is comprised of 2 11-minute episodes. The show covered roughly the first year of the Max comics. They introduced the main characters and followed the various storylines. The animation for the show was very well regarded. It was a mixture of a bunch of different styles, from cartoony to incredibly detailed hand-drawn animation. It was nominated for Best Animated Program in 1995. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, the show was canceled after its first season. It's unclear as to if this was due to the expense of the show or just a lack of viewership. The last episode aired on June 19th, 1995. The comic series continued for years, and if you can, I highly recommend giving them a read. The show was released on DVD, and like The Head, it was burn on demand. The DVD has all the episodes, including commentaries for each. The DVDs are still available, or you can also purchase them digitally from Amazon. Dead at 21. Dead at 21 was a very, very experimental live-action show from MTV. The first episode premiered on June 15th, 1994. It was about Ed, played by Jack Noseworthy, who wakes up on his 20th birthday to discover that when he was a child, he was part of a botched experiment. He has a microchip installed in his head that makes him hyper-intelligent, but it'll also kill him when he turns 21. He's being chased by an agent for the company, and he joins up with a young girl named Maria to try to get some answers as well as prevent his death. The show had a music video look to it, which was fairly unique at the time. Music videos weren't unique on MTV, but using the style in a narrative program was. This felt like the right blend of hip show for the younger crowd mixed with technobabble. Think Hackers if it was about life and death. Each episode was a half hour long and filled with some of the more popular music at the time. The show ended on a cliffhanger, which proved they were planning on more episodes, but the show only lasted one season with 13 episodes. The last episode aired on September 7th, 1994. The show has never been released on any sort of home media, and because of all the music involved in the show, it most likely never will. Figuring out the rights to each song and doling out the royalties accordingly would be far too expensive to do. A few of the episodes are available on YouTube, but some of the audio is muted, which makes it a tough watch. There are other places out there who have the whole series, though. Undressed. Undressed, or MTV's Undressed, was a show that was way ahead of its time. It was about the love lives of various high schoolers and college students. Why was this so ahead of its time? It approached younger people's sex and sexuality in a very bold and frank way. They covered teen and 20-something relationship drama in a way that felt more real than what you would see on the major networks. It's no worse than something like American Pie or Porky's, just not handled as a comedy. It's done here in a fairly even-handed and serious way. Each episode had multiple stories that would usually run for the whole season. This was the formula they followed for the entire run, only with each new season they brought in a new cast. Speaking of the cast, they managed to hire numerous actors and actresses who would go on to much bigger things. Mark Blucas, Christina Hendricks, Pedro Pascal, Chad Michael Murray, Katie Sackhoff, Brandon Routh, Autumn Reeser, and many others. Seriously, go look up the cast listing for the show. It's crazy how many well-known actors got their start here. The show premiered on July 26, 1999. The first season ran for 30 episodes. They ran a new episode every weeknight, which helped to keep the momentum of the show going since there were so many storylines to follow. Much like a soap opera aimed at a younger audience. If they spaced it out weekly, it may not have worked. The show was a hit and ran for 6 seasons and 225 episodes when they decided to pull the plug. The last episode aired on September 5th, 2002. The show incorporated tons of music, much like Dead at 21. Also like Dead at 21, it was never, and most likely will never be released on a home video format. If 13 episodes of Dead at 21 is too hard to work out the music rights, imagine trying to do that with 225 episodes. Sometime after 2010, one of the producers of the show released the series on YouTube's competitor Blip TV. Unfortunately, with Blip shutting down, all the shows are gone, and you can't see them complete anywhere else. You can see a random batch of episodes on YouTube, but many have been taken down for music claims. The show was created by Roland Joffe, the award-winning British director and producer of both movies and television. It was very unlike TV shows in the US, which makes all the more sense since it was created by a Brit. Many of the episodes were written by Damon Lindelof, who would go on to create the insanely popular TV series Lost. You Wrote It, You Watch It. You Wrote It, You Watch It was another uniquely original show from MTV. The concept was simple enough. MTV reached out to his audience and told them to send stories about their lives. Stuff they did at college, weird experiences they had, and so on. Then they'd pick the ones they liked the most and reenact them with members of the comedy troupe The State, before they were given their own show. Hosting the whole thing was a very young Jon Stewart in his second acting job in the industry after short attention span theater. The show premiered on October 10th, 1992. They ran the show with this disclaimer.
The stories you are about to see are true. The names have not been changed so that your friends can make fun of you tomorrow. Any similarity between the characters depicted here and any actual persons is completely intentional.
They covered such topics as the couple who lost their dog named Batman, which had them out in the city yelling, "Batman!" as well as numerous tales of hilarity from college campuses. Stewart would introduce the segments, usually with a witty comment or two. While the idea of a show that involved audience participation seemed like it would have been a hit for the MTV crowd, it just didn't go over well, and the show was very quickly canceled. I couldn't even get a general idea of how many episodes were produced or when the final one aired. The funny thing is, this sort of show would work really well now. I'm surprised there isn't a YouTube channel that does this, or maybe there is and I haven't heard of it. MTV did have a solid working relationship with Stewart, and even though You Wrote It, You Watch It wasn't a success, they gave him his own talk show, The Jon Stewart Show, in 1993, which he hosted for 160 episodes. He'd later go on to take over The Daily Show in 1999 and continue to work there for 16 years. You Wrote It, You Watch It hasn't been released on home media, but there are a few random episodes on YouTube. It's an interesting footnote in Stewart's career, and the guy who would start here looking somewhat hungover each episode, to going on to be one of the most well-known political pundits of his time. In Stewart's biography, he said about the show, "You wrote it, you just didn't watch it." Well, that's 5 shows from some better days on MTV. I personally love this era because it felt like the perfect blend. They had a wide variety of music videos during the day, and then in the evening, there were all these shows that were directed at people like me. Now you can go to any number of cable channels or YouTube channels to find content you feel is catered directly to you. However, back then, there was only a few cable channels, and having a huge one like MTV trying out so many bizarre topics, it was a refreshing alternative to the boring mainstream. Unfortunately, MTV couldn't find sustainability in this, and took something like The Real World, which was a major trailblazer for the time, and overdid it to the point of making the once edgy series feel boring and formulaic. And now they fill their time with garbage shows like Teen Mom and Jersey Shore. Music videos are almost forgotten on the channel, where that was supposed to be the main draw. I know they're in a weird spot because the people who grew up shouting "I want my MTV" are older and have kids who only know MTV as that lame channel with nothing but Catfish or Floribama. There was a time when MTV was not only relevant, but the standard that others tried to follow. Now it just sucks.
Just go rinse off. What's the big deal?
The big deal is... I just lost it.
Lost what? I didn't see anything.